Hello, and welcome to another episode of eDiscovery Chicks, the podcast about all things eDiscovery and legal tech, hosted by two gals who are doing battle with spring and the allergies that it brings along with it. Anyways, we're your hosts. That's Bree.
And that's Angie. Not only are we battling the allergies, some of us have to deal with extreme weather conditions. What the hell? We had last night we had a hailstorm that was unbelievable, and it was so bad. It kept me up all night. I would love to sit outside when like in a rainstorm because I love the smell of the rain. I love the way the wind feels, but the wind was like simultaneously blowing in all directions at the same time, and there's hail coming down.
Those were golf balls falling out of the sky.
They're huge. And the thing is we're constantly running out of ice around here. Like, can I put my cocktail glasses outside? I was so mad too because I cannot be trusted with any plant life. Like, I will kill everything. But for Christmas, some fine people in my life that I'm pretty sure just did this to make fun of me gave me succulents, and they're so cute and they're so pretty, and I have them out on this little table outside. The freaking hail demolished all of them. I'm like, I was doing so good. I mean, we're in March, people, and they were still alive.
Succulents are hard, though. We used to have them, and then I bought succulent food, and I gave them
food. They need food? I didn't know that.
Don't do it. I killed them all within 24 hours of this succulent food. It was a Miracle Grow succulent food. They all died. And I was like, all right, I'm done with succulents. I've moved on. I'm currently in the process of killing a cactus.
I've killed many a cacti.
They're hard.
No. Well, and then after the hail came and after all the storms, and by the way, the power went off like 50,000 million times. But then you wake up today and it's like this beautiful day, except for the fact that you walk outside and you take one whiff and all of a sudden you're sneezing your head off because it's like,
oh my God,
pollen times 1,000,000 outside.
Can I just say I love Bree math, which is 50,000 million times and 100,000 million times or whatever. I'm loving the Bree math.
Oh, God. My husband makes so much fun of me for that.
You got gaslit by the weather. Like, it hailed all last night, and then this morning it was like, what?
Exactly.
So we moved like 3 years ago, and we had this jasmine plant by our front door at our old house. And it was like massive, right? Like, we had grown it up this whole trellis situation. We had no way to move it. Like, we couldn't move it. We had to cut it down. It was the saddest thing ever. But we brought the pot. Like, we just cut it down, brought the pot, left everything. After 2 years, that jasmine came back.
Are you serious?
It flowered. Yeah. So we were like, this is the coolest thing ever. We are going to be like plant parents. We like took it out. We planted it in the garden.
Uh-oh.
We hired people. We finally splurged. We're like, we're going to hire yard people. They cut it down. And we were like, that terrible. Was our child. Oh, well, I'm about halfway through my ranch water. So should we move this along?
Oh, God. I guess we are here to talk about eDiscovery.
Remember, the EDRM is a multi-part process. You have identification, preservation, both of which you've already covered. Identifying is figuring out what data you need. Preservation is making sure that all that data stays put. We are now on part 3 of that lovely little EDRM journey, which is collection and processing. And in future episodes, we're going to move on to the remaining steps, which are review and analysis, then production, and finally, presentation.
When we're talking about collection and processing, one of the things that are involved is early case assessment. By the way, we should probably warn the folks that today's episode is filled with, here, let's use my math, 50,000 million acronyms and vocabulary words or jargon. And the nice thing about performing early case assessment on your data is that you're trying to control the uncontrollable. We're doing keyword searches at this point. We're having battles with opposing counsel. Can we run these 50,000 million words? Look, maybe we should do a drinking game for my math problems. Should we run all of these keywords? Should we not? How much is this going to cost us? Do we even have the data that we're supposed to have? What about our data retention plans in-house? Did we purge that data? The point is that when you're doing an early case assessment, you know your data better than anybody else. So you get to make the decision, what is in scope here when we move forward to collection and processing?
Yeah. So, first, before I define collection, which is what I was about to do, I just want to say that early case assessment we should do a whole episode on it, honestly. It's wonderful for people who are very type A and have control issues. And I very squarely fall into that category. So, early case assessment is like one of my favorite things to nerd out about. Anywho, collection. So let's start by defining that. Collection is gathering potentially relevant electronically stored information, or ESI jargon, collecting that ESI, and you're going to collect the ESI that you have identified during the identification phase of the EDRM.
So we identify it, we've collected it. Now, in order for us to do anything with it, we really have to process it next. So what processing does is it's basically bridging the gap between collection and review of that data. It's normalizing it so that we have a way in which we can run those keywords across that data. And we can see the content of what are in those documents. When we do go through the processing steps, we want to do that in a consistent way. But sometimes our ESI protocol, what that we have between the parties involved in a lawsuit, for example, can govern how we process that data to begin with. So before you go hog wild and decide that you're going to collect and process the heck out of your data, you should probably check in first to see if there are any agreements between the parties, or if your judge has parameters that you need to follow in terms of how you process the data. And it can be pretty complicated sometimes.
Just like a quick defining the boundaries here. So we can't possibly cover everything that is part of this conversation. It's a big topic. We bit off a big bite today. And so we just can't jump down every rabbit hole. But if there is something in particular that you want to hear about, DM us and let us know, and we might come out with like a little shorty episode or something about it. Let's move it right along into why we collect and process and what we collect and process.
Usually we collect for two main reasons, either to preserve, which means I think that there might be some sort of shenanigans going on with Joe Blow, who just left the organization. I want to collect and preserve his data just in case I have to go research what he was up to right before he walked out the door and stole all the things, right? Sometimes we collect to preserve. This can also happen, though, like when we have terminated employees and they've got things like a mail account. We need that license for another employee. We don't want to retain all that information because we want to move on with our lives. Well, legal can't move on because there might be some tidbits in there that helps us with an investigation or is prevalent to an ongoing litigation. So we're collecting it to preserving it. We're just holding it there just in case we need to tap into that data another time. So another reason why we collect is we know immediately we got to do something with that data. We got a subpoena that walked in the door and they're asking for some very specific information. Or we have a litigation that we're in the middle of and the other side is like, y'all need to produce your documents about XYZ. And so we need to produce those as either discovery or maybe we're using them as evidence in a trial, for example. So that's some reasons why we collect. And what exactly are we collecting, Angie?
So we are going to collect anything that is subject to that legal hold. So remember, we've talked about in previous episodes defining the scope of your legal hold, and that's based on the data and the custodians that you identify as possibly being relevant. So you're going to need to collect data from those sources, and then anything else that kind of comes out of that. So you collect data, you start looking at it, and you realize, hey, we actually need to broaden the scope of this. As far as what data sources are potentially in scope, it can really be like any form of data. You know, we're not just talking about email, we're not just talking about texts. This could be anything from like office documents, you know, your Word document, your Google Doc that you create. Could be audio, video files, could be pictures, phone messages like text or WhatsApp or Signal. It could be internet logs, forensic images of devices, phone records, paper documents, God forbid, any sort of proprietary applications that you have. If you have anything that's like enterprise software you have in-house, you could have to collect for that. Security badge logs, the Internet of Things. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The world's your oyster as far as what you might want to collect.
Yeah, and some of those data sources are really easy to collect. and some of them are not so easy. Phones can be a real hiccup in our collection efforts. Why? Well, because sometimes we allow our employees to use their own phones. And what's on your own phone? Like your kids' graduation pictures. And I don't
Mhm.
know. Actually, I was looking at my own phone the other day and I was like, people would think I'm actually insane because I have pictures of my blood pressure reading on my blood pressure cuff. I
Oh, yeah,
have
you got
like,
it. You gotta do that.
what's this bug in the window?
What the
Here's my favorite recipe. What's this hair in my nose? Like,
fuck?
what? I mean, seriously, nobody wants to see any of that. So, I mean, that makes it hard, right? Because we have personal information that's intertwined with business information or potentially relevant information. We also have a little problem of some people that like to ignore all the rules and like to, wipe their devices and like to password protect everything and not share any of their credentials, even though they're supposed to. So, that can be problematic. Paper, it is hilarious to me because paper is how all this started to begin with, and it is still a problematic source of information because we still have to deal with it in a very old school way, scanning it, OCRing it, tiffing it, and having to go find it. Like, who has paper anymore? That crap is like in some off-woods warehouse that's probably had a hailstorm or two. Also, brand new apps.
Or
That
even
can
like new developments to existing apps.
Yes, exactly. And chat I mean, people are getting so smart, these little young whippersnappers, and they want to have apps where everything disappears, right? I want to tell you this, but then I want it to go away. That crap is hard to even try to capture, right? Trying to get forensic images of old stuff. We have this old video camera that's been around since I was in high school. How do you get that? Or the printer that was in the closet that nobody ever uses anymore, but they printed all the reports on there, like trying to get that kind of stuff. And then we also have the wiped data. What happens when they try to cover their tracks? That can be problematic. So,
And there's a difference between data that you delete and data that you double delete,
yes, there
which is really
is.
fun.
you know, all of this is kind of subject to, is it worth our time? I mean, we heard from the judge a couple of weeks ago, some things are just too burdensome and too expensive. Like you're just not going to go there because the matter doesn't warrant that. Who does those collections? Sometimes those can be in-house collections at a company like, hey, I know my email system, I know my voicemail system, whatever. Easy for me to export that data. But then sometimes you do have the backwoods, video cameras or whatever that nobody knows how to do anything with. So you've got to go to an expert to do that, or you have to go to an expert to decrypt data. You can use software to collect your data. There's great tools on the market, of course, that can send out agents to your PCs and collect, entire image of your PC or connect
Agent
using
is not a person in this situation.
no, no. Anyway, so you can have experts that have to go take very specialized collections of like hardware and that sort of thing. You can also do those collections in house using a software. I have a software program that has connectors to all these different software programs that I have, maybe using APIs, for example, to jump into my box.com account or my Google account or whatever. You also have the option to allow your employees or the different people that are in legal hold, your custodians, to self-collect. This is not ideal though, because there is this little thing called chain of custody. We have to prove that we got something from whatever that data source is and that it was an authentic collection. So when people go out and collect their own data, when they self-collect, sometimes it's hard to prove that up. I mean, we're talking here about what we collect, who collects, and what's hard to collect. But after we do that collection, then we're processing.
Yes, we are. And so let's talk about why we process our data. So there are, to use Bree math, 50,000 million different data sources that you could possibly collect from. We want to standardize that data. We want to pull it all into one place, and we want to kind of make it look and act the same so that we can run searches against it and filter it and tag it and all of those things. Typically, there will be a process for this that will be dictated in the ESI protocol, or electronically stored information protocol, that's part of your matter. I think we're probably going to do a whole episode on ESI protocols later, but for right now, suffice it to say, ESI protocols are basically your rules of the road, and it will very likely dictate the method that you use to collect and or process your data.
I mean, to break it down simply, we can take data from a variety of different locations. We can take the data from that video camera back in the backwoods. Wow, that sounds sus. Or we can take somebody's email, or we can
That's very
take,
murdery.
it's very, like, I want to write a book about that. We can take the OCR that we've received off of paper documents. We can take somebody's computer, their desktop files. We can take all the documents that were in their box.com account. We can take all the documents that were on a network share. We can take from all of these different resources and process that data in a way that we can analyze it as a whole. Meaning that now that we've processed that data, there are now things called fields that contain information that we call metadata. What the flock is metadata? So, metadata are things like who was the author? Angie. What was the date that she last modified it or the date that she edited it? Edited it. Wow. I talk for a living. Who were the recipients of the email? What is the name of the file? What is the content of that file? All of these different fields are applied across the board. That's one thing that helps us normalize, which is a fancy Angie term, the data.
Yeah.
Angie, when we talk about processing data, it can get super complicated. And I know that you have kind of boiled this down in a way where you have an analogy
One of
that
my
helps us
favorites.
understand what the heck we were
Yes.
talking about.
Yes. Okay. So here is how you can think about processing. So imagine you have a ton of spices in your kitchen, but they're all in different cabinets and some of them might be expired and it's all just like chaos. So maybe you spend a day and you go through all of your spices. You find a nice home for them, maybe put them in a spice drawer or a rack, and you organize them, maybe alphabetically. And as you go, you put little labels on them, identifying the spice and its expiration date. So as you sift through your spices, you notice that you have duplicates of some. Some are out of date, and others are things you never use, and others you need to restock. But at the end of it, you've standardized the way you're going to store these things. You've eliminated any of the crap you don't need, and you've developed a system where you can easily find what you need, like alphabetizing. So you've got your whole spice rack is organized in the same way, it's all got the same information, and it's nice and neat and tidy. That is processing.
I love that analogy so much. And I think, like, even to further along that thought, if you go through
Ooh.
and you're pulling all the spices that you need just to make your mom's famous chili recipe, then you're culling. That's another term.
Ooh.
But you're culling that data. You're trying to figure out what are just the essential spices you need for that recipe. Can I just have a side note here? I have people on my team at work that think it is normal to have pineapple in chili. Now, I am from Texas and I don't even like beans in chili. But these
What?
people putting pineapples in their chili, it like blows my brain up every time. And they like harass me. I get pictures in my team page. Here's chili. And it has like zucchinis and pineapple and weird crap. I
Is
don't
not
know who
chili.
raised you people. Anyway,
These are the same people that eat Hawaiian pizza.
I beg to differ because I love, but I like my version of Hawaiian pizza is pepperoni, pineapple, and jalapeno. Like that is some good
Okay.
stuff right there. Anyway.
Pineapple and jalapeno, great combo.
Yeah. Well, have you ever had a smoky pineapple jalapeno margarita?
You mean like a mezcal marg with
Yes,
pineapple in it?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, talk dirty to me. So why are we doing any of this? Why do we need to process it? Well, part of it is so that we can load it into a review platform and actually look at it. You can't just go and look at like code gobbledygook, or at least like most of us can't. But like I certainly can't read JSON data and be like, cool, yep, got it. So we process it so we can load it into a review platform. One of the goals of processing is to convert all of our files, images, text, metadata into some sort of appropriate format where we can load it into litigation support software. You can usually review this data within that same application that processes it. Like usually you buy one tool you load your data into it, it processes it and just spits it into your review platform. But you don't have to do it that way. You can just buy a tool that processes your data and then you can ship that whole file out. That is like all the data that you've collected and processed. You can't just ship it out somewhere else. So that's also an option for you.
That's right, Angie. And bringing us back to that whole conversation about ESI protocol and why we have to think about that at the very beginning of processing, it fits in right here. Because when we process the data, we review the data, then we have to produce the data. We produce it a lot of times with load files. And load files are kind of like a map. They're like, hey, here's all of the information that we're going to produce to you. Here's all the PDF documents, the emails, the Word documents, whatever. And then here's all of the text that's on those documents. Here's all the metadata, meaning all those fields that we're talking about that pertain to those documents. And the thing that's going to put it all together for us, like a big fat map, is a load file. So you have to have that load file that tells your e-discovery system where to go to get what. When I click this button to go see this Word document, how do I know who wrote it? How do I know what it says? How do I know what it looks like? The reason why I have all of that at the click of a button is that I have a load file that's automatically pulling it all together for me. And what is contained within a load file oftentimes are parameters that have been decided at the very beginning of litigation, where the parties are like, I want your load file to have the such and such field. And the other side saying, I want your load file to have this field. And then you've had this agreement, or you've had a
And then
judge.
the
It's
other
like,
side is like, would you like us to assign someone to butter your load file?
and the judge is like, I don't care what you yahoos want in your load file. This is what's happening in your load file.
Like, if I
So
hear the word load file one more time.
I got a load for you and your file. But yeah, so that's a thing or two regarding load files.
Okay, and so let's talk about how we actually do this. Like we've talked about why, now let's talk about how. So the big how is we use software. And there are a couple of ways that you actually get your data from where it originally lives into a software that can process it. In the good old days, or if you don't have a more modern approach, you can use just traditional ingestion is what it's called. So that's where you just pull data out of one application, say email, for example. Let's use Google as an example. So with Google, Google's got a component to it called Vault. And you can use Vault to actually pull data out of anyone within your org's email. And so you could go in on the back end and pull stuff out, and then Google Vault will produce a file for you. And you can load that into your e-discovery software and it'll process it. If you're feeling fancy, you can use what's called an API. An API is it's jargon for application programming interface, which are words I didn't actually know were associated with API until we started prepping for this episode. And then I was like, oh, I've been using this word for years and I had no idea what it actually meant. So what they allow you to do, though, which is the actually important thing that you need to remember, not the acronym, is it's basically like a digital handshake between two software applications. So think about e-discovery software reaching out to your Gmail in an API and being like, hey, what's up? I have some questions. I need some things. And Gmail being like, well, I've got some things and I can give them to you. That's an API. So they're typically built up by the software platform. Like Google makes its own APIs, Slack makes its own, etc. And if you're sitting in your e-discovery software and you need to get some data out of Gmail, you can use that API to do it. They do have limitations. We aren't going to cover them in today's episode because that's a big ass rabbit hole. But think about that shout as us being like, hey, Google, we need some things. And Google being like, yeah, okay, I can give you A, B, and C, but I can't give you D and E. That's what we mean by limitations. Part of this process is to extract that metadata that we've talked about. So I don't know, Bree, maybe I'll pass the torch over to you. I've been talking for a minute. I need a drink.
I want to add on kind of to what you're talking about here. Because like, if you think about it, we're sitting here trying to say, hey, I get a bunch of data that I need to review. How do I get it into a tool that can help me do this review in a way that's not going to make me go and pull my hair out? And I can actually get on with other things that are more important in my life.
Promise that.
Well, I mean, first of all, my hair is like 3 inches long or something, so maybe I shouldn't be talking. So there's two ways of doing that, right? And one is through that API connection that Angie is talking about. And she also referenced the second one, which was ingestion. But I want to just expand upon that for a sec, because we are kind of coming at this from a corporate perspective because Angie and I both have been in-house and we've worked that grind, right? But when you are somebody like a law firm where you've got clients that are coming from, here we go, 50,000 million places.
Bring that.
No, you've got a lot of different clients from a variety of different places that are using applications all over the globe, right? Like you don't have any control over if they're Google, if they're O365, if they're Yahoo, Hotmail, AOL, whoever uses that. There could be
Hotmail.
hey, but there could be all kinds of things at play here, and you don't have the API license for all of those applications and or the security to be able to go into your client's environment and pull all of that into your own review tool. So you have to rely on ingestion. So sometimes that is a super legitimate way to populate your review tool with information. The thing that we all have to be very careful of is how many places has your data been before you ingest it into your tool? How dirty is your data?
Ooh.
Maybe that could
Spicy.
be an after hours episode. So we've found the data, whether we ingested the data into our application, our software application, or we've collected it directly from an API and now it's in our application to review. We are met sometimes with the crossroad of, hey, all of my data has searchable text on it because it came from sophisticated applications, except for this raunchy, dirty data that I got from an ingestion from God knows where that doesn't have any searchable text on it. What do I do? Well, the thing that you would do is you would run OCR, which stands for optical character recognition. OCR used to be like the thing you would do all the time. Like you had to OCR everything that you were going to look at in some sort of software system because nothing that we were looking at back in the day had searchable text. These days, though, all of our systems have searchable text for the most part. So, searchable text, meaning that when I go search for a word or a character or a number within a file, whether that's a Word document or Excel document or what have you, a picture, I am able to pull up results from that search. So, for example, if I'm looking for Angie across all of my Word documents on my computer, I would be able to find her name on only those documents that have searchable text. There might be things like pictures that have Angie's beautiful face on them, but typing in her name won't actually result in any hits because there's no searchable text within that file that would hit for that word.
Like
So,
part of the code of the document itself, as opposed to a photo where there's no code in it with words.
absolutely. Although you could have a photo where somebody took a picture of your love letter to Angie and you want to be able to search it because that girl is up to no good and we got to know what's up.
You know what?
So, if you have something like a file that has words on it, but you can't search it, you would want to run OCR against that file to give you that ability to include it in searches along with the rest of your data. I hope that made sense.
I think it did.
The key tip here is if you utilize OCR, which honestly we all should, because even
Yeah.
Microsoft at its finest, which that's debatable, but anyway, even Microsoft has unindexable file formats because
Mm-hmm.
they can't find the words on it. They can't, and it could be even for reasons like it's encrypted or it's compressed, and I can't find the words that you're looking. I can't find the words. So I mean, we have to consider OCR as an important part of the process. It doesn't play as much of a role as it used to, but the important thing is that we're not running it against all of our data when we're in the processing mode, and we are able to kind of pick and choose which files we want to run it against.
I'm just going to like take a 10-second nerd break. So it is cool because I think there were originally only like 150 characters that OCR recognized. That's all from like the Unicode family. But now I think there's something like 15,000 characters that OCR will recognize. So it can like determine what an A is or like an umlaut now, so it's got other languages and stuff.
Wow.
It's really fun. One of the other big reasons that we process our data is because it keeps what's called the family structure intact. Family structure, another lingo, another jargon. So family structure is just the relationship between two documents. So the most common example of this is going to be an email that has an attachment. In that example, the email is the parent and the attachment is the child, and that's the family structure. So when you process your data, the software actually goes in, takes a little look-see behind, like goes under the hood, looks at all the different metadata associated with your documents, and it will see that, hey, this attachment is actually like the child of this parent email, and it keeps that intact. So then when you load it into your review software and you're going through your documents, you can actually toggle on a setting that shows you the family structure. And so if you're reading the email, you see it has an attachment, you can just go and find the child attachment. So that's family structure. Very fun. Anyway, the other super cool thing that processing software will do is it will thread your email. More jargon. Told you, we warned you this was going to be a jargon heavy episode, but we are trying to define everything. So email threading is the practice of grouping together email messages that are all part of the same discourse so that they can be understood, reviewed, and coded consistently as a unit. So we're going to be a little nerdy for a second, but I got a relatable example. I'm going to use Star Wars. So like I said, not real world, but relatable. So say Han emails Luke and is like, hey man, pretty sick how you destroyed the Death Star. And Luke replies, thanks. Oh, and by the way, I'm really into Tauntauns now. That exchange has two segments. It's Han's original email to Luke and then Luke's reply. When Han sent that original email, it only lived in his email sent box with no replies. And then when Luke got it, it had that same one segment. But then he replied. And so it's now his reply plus Han's original email that lives in his sent box. But they also live in Han's inbox. And so basically what email threading does is it takes all of those things and mushes them together into the most inclusive thread. So that in this instance, it would be Han's original email plus Luke's reply. So you don't get all those little like hangers on.
Oh my God. You are such a nerd.
And okay, so I'm going to actually take this further. So bear with me here,
Oh
folks.
no. I don't know if my brain can handle it.
So then the other thing that this is really helpful for is for providing context. So say in this situation, we are looking for emails related to, let's say, intergalactic relations between rebels and the Empire. So you get to
for real.
That's for real. So say you get to Han's first email and you're like, yeah, that's relevant. Whatever. But then you get to the email where Luke's talking about his like new tauntaun fetish or whatever. And you see, if you only saw Luke's reply and he's like, yeah, super cool, really into tauntauns now, you would mark that as not relevant. When you thread the email, you get the whole context. So say you're looking to see, like, did Luke ever say anything about intergalactic relations? Maybe, but it only makes sense in the context of the entire thread. So that's another reason why we do it, is to provide that context. And it also saves you money because you're paying outside lawyers probably to review all this data. So if they had to review every single component of that email thread between the two of them, you're basically paying them to review the same stuff like 4 different times when they could have only reviewed one doc.
Yeah, and it's really helpful when your software, by the way, will group threads together. That's because it allows your outside reviewers that you're paying $50,000 million to. There you go, drink up. It allows those outside reviewers to kind of combine everything that's being talked about in one place. So you can code it responsive or not responsive or privilege or whatever your desire is, all at the same time. We're still talking about processing, and man, there's a lot to it. So just to add on to the fun that we're having, let's talk about culling and filtering, denisting, deduping. What does all of that mean? And you know what? Like, these terms are things that anybody that's been in e-discovery will throw around like they're rock stars. Like, did you denist that? Is it deduped? Is it deduped across the custodians? Is it deduped globally? How did you dedupe it?
Go pound sand. Those are table stakes, my friend.
So let's talk about that. So denisting, getting rid of all the stuff that you don't care about reviewing because you're not doing a forensic examination here. These are, there's a list of different types of files that were created by the National Software Reference Library. There you go. There's some Googling for you to do.
Do not remember that acronym.
But these different types of files will be things that would be removed when you denist because they're files typically created by a machine and not a person, is basically what that's all about. So that's what we mean when we are denisting. We collected Angie's computer, but we don't need to know like how her hard drive was running security scans in the middle of the night. But what we really want is just the files that she created. So that's what we mean when we say denisting. And then we've got deduping. So we're deduplicating our data. We're taking out all of the duplicates. And you have some options typically when you do this. Do we want to dedupe by custodian? Meaning, I'm collecting all of Angie's data. I'm collecting it from her Google Vault. I'm collecting it from her Exchange Online. I'm collecting from Teams. I'm collecting from WhatsApp. I'm collecting from Box.com. I'm collecting her computer. I'm collecting all her stuff. I'm even collecting her mobile data and that printer in the backwoods that she used. But I'm
getting my cat photos off my phone.
It's better than nasal hair photos. I'm collecting all of her things and I want to dedupe across all of her universe because I want to make sure that I'm only getting one version of all of her emails. That is what we need to dedupe by custodian. When we globally dedupe, that means we are deduping across a group. So if we're talking about, I don't know, what's a good group? You can think of
Han, Leia.
Oh, God, here we go.
All the rebels.
So we're collecting the rebels' data because that is a normal thing that we would do in real life. And when we dedupe across,
are you saying Star Wars is not real life?
I don't want to burst any more bubbles. I feel like we've had some hard conversations today, and I don't want to make this one of them. When we dedupe across all the rebels, that means we consider if everybody received the same email about, hey, you're not real, then we're only keeping one version of that. So when we are processing, we can also have filters. And I feel like, Angie, you're a lot better at using your filters than I am. So maybe I should let you talk about this.
Ooh, I love a filter moment. Okay, so when we process data, there is a part where you can actually go in and you can like pick the things that you want to process out of each document. So like if you think about a Microsoft Word document or something, that has hundreds of quote unquote fields that you could produce. So you could produce like doc title, last edited, who's all accessed it, just like to name a few. But maybe you don't want all of those. So maybe we just want to process certain fields. And maybe what we want to do in this situation is we want to process a whole slew of docs from Microsoft Word, but we only want ones that were created during a certain date range. Or maybe we only want ones that were created during a certain date range by a specific person that have these specific keywords in them, or that have these specific keywords within 10 words of these specific keywords. You can actually filter by all of those things. And it's a really powerful tool because imagine you've got like a big lawsuit or something and you're a company and you're trying to collect 500 people's emails. But you know that you really only want things that are going to talk about the stuff that's related to that lawsuit. Well, instead of collecting terabyte worth of data from these people, you could filter by date ranges that are applicable to that lawsuit, by keywords that reference material that is relevant to the lawsuit, and things like that. So filtering by keyword and metadata, super, super powerful and important. I love this. I could talk about this forever. It's my passion.
Well, and I mean, it's your passion because it saves your company. Here we go. Hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. When you can have control over your own data, that is huge. We have talked about today collecting from a wide variety of data sources, and we like to kind of goof around about all the random possibilities of where you could be collecting data from. But in real life, You never know with litigation. I mean, that's part of why we all still do this, is because it is always something fun. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dealing with litigation, you could be walking in and you're dealing with like, a slip and fall. You could be walking in, you're dealing with a poisonous blueberry. You can walk in.
Someone
You
could have
could
blown
be
up a Death Star.
exactly. I mean, whatever anybody can dream up to sue someone over, you're dealing with. So we've talked about collecting data from a wide variety of different data sources. And because we are collecting from that wide variety of data sources, we have to process it so that we can review it all at the same time in a very efficient way and get to the nitty gritty of what we actually need to produce, what we're responsible for. I need to be able to tell very quickly what happened between the dates of blank and blank. Or I need to be able to tell very quickly what happens when I run these different keywords through my data. I need to have those results immediately. And that is what processing gets you. We've given you guys some tips and tricks along the way. We've explained a lot of verbiage along the way. And I am sorry, it's not our fault. This is super complicated, but we're trying to break it down in a way that it's palatable. But the truth is that there's conversations that can really stem from every single different kind of data source, every type of matter. We could even get in the weeds about how we process. And by the way, one thing we didn't even mention yet is what happens after you process. There's exceptions to everything, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
exceptions to what we couldn't process. There were errors. And so reporting on that and auditing it and being aware of the exceptions along the way are super important. Also, being able to process your data in a way that you can produce things like privilege logs easily, and keyword reports is very important as well. Angie, I feel like we have so much that we could have talked about on this episode. And I
We really
don't want to.
pull it down.
I know we do. And so, one thing I know that we can really look forward to is we have a guest that will be joining us in our next episode. I don't know if we should reveal who that is. I mean, how do you feel about
I think
that?
you've already teased it. Like, I think we got to give the people
Mm.
something. Let's just say we have a very exciting guest, one of the preeminent e-discovery authors. You have probably heard about this person most days of the week.
If you're
Uh,
alive
if you're alive.
and
Yeah.
paying
So
attention.
I'm paying attention. So yeah. So we are super, super excited. Stay tuned for that episode. In the meantime, definitely catch us on our socials. You can find us on LinkedIn at eDiscoveryChicks. You can also email us if you have any questions or topic requests, and that email address is admin@ediscoverychicks.com. And then until next time, folks.
I'm
Bye.
like, I'm like, are you gonna say may the force be with us? I'm
May
just
the
waiting.
force be with you. Until next time. And happy processing, folks.
Yes, and happy spring.
Happy spring.